Okay, let's get into it. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are tearing apart a future where your personal status isn't really measured by your bank account.
No, no.
It's measured by how successfully you've managed to just abolish the concept of your own death.
Right.
We are dropping headfirst into a world where dying is, for some people, just a severe bureaucratic inconvenience, provided, you've got the cash to buy your way back into life.
In that necessity, the fact that it all comes down to resources, well, that changes everything. It changes society, justice, power, all of it.
Yeah.
The foundational concept of this whole reality is the cortical stack. You should think of it as the ultimate black box. It's this cylindrical device they implant at the base of your skull.
Right there in the brainstem.
Exactly. And it houses the digital version of your consciousness. They call it the DH, or digitized human.
So your entire personality, your memories, everything, it's just data.
It's all just data. And that data can be instantaneously needle cast. I mean, literally beamed across light years and then uploaded into a new body. Sleeve.
And that sleeve can be biological or it can be synthetic.
Whatever you can afford.
That one piece of tech, it just sets the stage for a universe built on this inherent contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
Our central figure, Takeshi Kovacs, is an envoy. He's a former tactical operative, basically designed for interstellar warfare, who has just been abruptly re-sleeved in Bay City on Earth.
Yeah, and he's been pulled out of indefinite storage on his home world, Harlan's world. He's given a 6-week lease on his freedom on this new body, all to work for one of the planet's oldest and, frankly, most impossibly wealthy men, Laurens Bancroft.
And the mission itself it's a paradox. It completely encapsulates the central tension of this world.
It really does. Bancroft claims he was murdered. But how do you murder a man who makes sure his consciousness is backed up every 48 hours?
You can't, or you shouldn't be able to.
Exactly. So the investigation isn't just a whodunit. It's about figuring out who managed to inflict this, meaningless death on a man who couldn't be killed, and, more importantly, why they would even bother.
To really get our heads around the absurdity of Bancroft's death, we have to understand the mechanics of how people exist in this world. And it starts with Kovacs' own re-entry. His environment is immediately, it's telling.
It really is.
He describes coming up out of the tank in Bay City Central, and he notes this grim, chilly atmosphere. It's just a dull metal cylinder, unpainted walls, and this sense of institutional dread.
And that's a deliberate environmental contrast, right? Because Kovacs, he has experience with other storage facilities. He immediately remembers the re-sleeving rooms back on Harlan's world.
Which were what, nicer?
Oh, way nicer. He describes pastel colors and pretty attendants. Those places were designed to give you a comforting, almost sunny start to your new life after you've served your sentence. Bay City Central, though.
Not so much.
Not at all. It seems actively determined to remind you that even if your mind is a piece of code, your freedom is still subject to the Earthside penal system and all its grimness.
So right away, it establishes that even the process of rebirth is stratified. It's all based on class and politics. But let's unpack the sleeve itself, the physical body. Kovacs is in an organic sleeve.
Which means it comes with history. It comes with baggage.
Right. It's an early 40s model, protectorate standard, a swimmer's build, and he notes the physical stuff that comes with it, like a tightness in his lungs.
The old nicotine habit.
The old nicotine habit of the previous owner, and gorgeous scarring on the forearm. He accepts these little twingles and snags because he understands that organic bodies carry the ghost of the previous occupant, which synthetics just can't replicate.
And that historical baggage, that's actually highly sought after by the wealthy. But for people lower down the economic ladder, the choice is usually driven by necessity. And that means synthetic sleeves.
Which are often used for things like parole hearings, just because they're cheap to produce and maintain.
But Kovacs' experience with them is so visceral. He describes wearing one as too much like living alone in a drafty house.
Yeah, I love that line. But the most immediate, the most memorable flaw of synthetics, at least according to the sources, is the failure to get the flavor circuits right.
Yeah, that detail is brilliant.
Food, which should be this universal pleasure, it just ends up tasting like curried sawdust.
And that detail speaks to the limitations of mere replication. You can mimic human movement, you can mimic speech, but if you can't get that core sensory experience right, you haven't really replicated life. There's a psychological discomfort built into those synthetic bodies that the wealthy elite, who can afford pristine organic clones, they avoid that entirely.
So the synthetic body it's functionally sufficient, but it's spiritually empty.
Exactly.
Okay, so beyond the body type, we have the military customization that defines Kovacs's current existence, the neurochemical upgrade.
Right. And this isn't just a set of specialized skills. This is conditioning that is carved onto the nervous system.
So how does that function practically? What does it let him do?
It basically makes the Envoy a superior human template. The neurochem gives him enhanced physical performance. We're talking hyperspeed movements, instantaneous pupil dilation in near-zero light,
Wow.
and these incredibly complex psychological counterinterrogation routines. It's the ultimate bioweaponry, often including specific martial arts skills like fifth dan Shotokan proficiency.
So his whole nervous system has been fundamentally rewritten.
It has. And for Kovacs, this upgrade is the only reason he's free. He's a highly valued piece of government property, even if he's currently just leased out to a billionaire.
Okay, so let's contrast this rented, highly conditioned existence with the guaranteed industrial-scale immortality of the elite. Laurens Bancroft has achieved guaranteed immortality.
He has. Through meticulous remote storage, we know his stack data is updated every 48 hours.
Via direct needle cast.
And that 48-hour window is critical. It means that even if someone manages to kill his slave, at worst, they erase 2 days of his memories. That's it.
The moment that stack update happens, a copy of him is beamed into a shielded stack at the Psychosec installation at Alcatraz.
And he also keeps multiple organic clones just frozen there, ensuring instantaneous resleeving if he needs it.
The details they give us about Psychosec Alcatraz, they really illustrate the sheer, almost terrifying scale of Methuselah wealth and paranoia.
Oh, yeah. Bancroft owns the facility. It's a high-security fortress, described as granite gray on the outside with these deeply recessed windows. But inside...
It's a luxury resort.
Totally. Pastel colors, Gaudi-style windows, and staggering luxury details like air-cushioned vehicle transporters and staff who literally hand-clean the windows.
That contrast between the imposing military exterior and the soft, luxurious interior, that's fascinating.
It's a physical manifestation of their guaranteed safety. They're insulated from the ugly realities of the outside world, yet they live in a physical bunker. The security architecture reveals the industrial paranoia required to maintain immortality.
And they use a duplex storage system. What's that?
It means every client's data is stored on 2 separate 30-centimeter disks, and they're located in different parts of the building.
And it gets even more paranoid, which is something the critique noted we should really absorb. It's not enough to have 2 physical copies.
No. They use random code distribution and a system lock to prevent simultaneous access to both copies.
Why the random code distribution? What does that do?
Well, think about it. If a saboteur breached the facility, they couldn't just locate the client's file and delete it. The data is scattered. It's fragmented across multiple disks.
So you'd have to know the code.
You'd need to know the specific distribution code, and you'd need to breach the security of 2 separate locations at the exact same time. It turns sabotage into this incredibly complex, almost state-level operation.
This level of security is less about practical safety and more about just broadcasting your untouchable wealth. It's a guarantee that your ego will persist forever.
And the needlecast system for the updates is just as obsessive. We learned that the satellite uplink operates through a network of 18 secure clearing orbital platforms.
18.
18. And they're leased in a random sequence for no more than 20 seconds at a time.
So you can't predict the route.
It's virtually impossible to predict or intercept. It eliminates the risk of someone digitally capturing or corrupting the data while it's in transit. If you're a meth, you don't just buy immortality. You buy an entire industrial ecosystem of digital redundancy.
But despite all of that industrial-level paranoia, there is one constant threat that unites everyone, rich or poor.
Real death, RVD.
Right. Real death occurs when the cortical stack is destroyed, along with all local and remote copies. That results in true, permanent cessation of consciousness. It is the only true leveler in this world.
And the sources confirm that death is still a political tool. The police, we see this with Ortega, they still use erasure as a penalty for certain capital crimes.
So even though high-profile criminals like Dmitry Kadman often have their capital crimes commuted to centuries in storage, a digital life sentence, basically erasure is still that terrifying final option.
And this finality is often tied to political resistance. We see the historical, political dimension of this in the context of the Quellist Black Brigades during the unsettlement.
The guerrillas.
Yeah, these guerrillas took preemptive action to prevent their enemies from getting their data. They surgically implanted enzyme-triggered explosives into their own bodies.
Whoa, wow.
And these devices were designed to detonate based on Fury-related conditioning.
So if they were being interrogated, and they got angry or scared enough.
Boom. They would instantly self-destruct, atomizing their stack in the surrounding area, specifically to discourage interrogation. They chose real death over the possibility of their enemies extracting information or, even worse, torturing their digital consciousness.
That is a staggering commitment to ideological integrity.
It sets up this powerful thematic link, doesn't it? The Quellists focused on physical risk management to protect their digital integrity. Now, centuries later, the Meths are managing social risk to protect their own digital integrity.
So the focus shifts from ideological purity to pure self-preservation.
But the fundamental fear of data compromise, that remains exactly the same.
That's a perfect bridge. So let's move from the mechanics of the technology to the social architecture that allows people to live for centuries. When you can afford continuous resleeving, you become a Methuselah, a meth.
And Laurens Bancroft is the ultimate example. The term itself it's like a biblical weapon used by those who resent the fact that these people simply refuse to die.
And that longevity, it breeds this intense resentment that's clearly visible in the source material. We see explicit hostility, particularly from Lieutenant Ortega.
Oh yeah, the police officer from the Organic Damage Division.
She doesn't hide her prejudice at all. She states that the Meths are all the same, and she bitterly adds that living that long should be a crime. She sees them as exploiters who have corrupted the natural order of things.
What's so interesting is how Bancroft, on the other hand, processes this hatred. He views the enmity and the death threats as just part and parcel of everyday existence.
The price of success.
The price of success. He dismisses the police, people like Ortega, as just having a perspective problem. He's so elevated by time and wealth that he doesn't even recognize their hostility as a threat. To him, it's just background noise.
And a sense of perspective, which he uses to justify his status, it's rooted entirely in time, not in money.
Absolutely. He recalls looking at the stars when the colony ships were still in flight and they were waiting for the needle beams to return. That's a memory that spans centuries. It places him completely outside of contemporary human experience.
He really leans into this temporal superiority. He mentions his old astronomical telescope, and he notes it hadn't been used in nearly 2 centuries. He even points out this massive tree on his property that's over 700 years old.
And this is a crucial psychological insight that the critique wanted us to draw out. Bancroft is measuring his life in geological and historical eras, not in years or bank transactions.
And why does he do that?
He does it specifically to avoid confronting the mundane, petty reasons someone might actually want to kill him. If he's comparing his existence to a 700-year-old tree, he doesn't have to concern himself with the 2 days of memory he lost, or the petty infidelities that fueled his wife's revenge.
So his longevity magnifies his self-importance to the point of ethical blindness.
Completely.
Now let's look at the other end of the spectrum, the profound vulnerability of the poor. We see the economic crisis in areas like Licktown, which used to be Potrero. This is where people face a brutal reality. The single lifespan.
The single lifespan. It's a consequence of poverty in a death-optional world. If you lose your sleeve insurance policy and your body dies, your stack just goes into storage.
And it stays there.
Likely, forever, until a relative or some charity can afford to re-sleeve you. And if that never happens, you just remain an indefinitely stored digital entity, permanently trapped. It makes human existence fundamentally conditional. Life becomes an expensive service subscription.
And that contrast is so vividly drawn in the environment of the sex trade. On one hand, you have Jerry's closed quarters.
A low-end biocabin whorehouse, located literally under a defunct expressway. It's a safety violation. It's characterized by squalor and desperation.
And in stark contrast, you have the high-class prostitution houses, like Head in the Clouds, which caters to the elite.
Right. These places are spotless, they're airborne, and they offer sophisticated virtual entertainment, including virtual snuff.
But the critical distinction is that this virtual snuff is legal. Because while it simulates the sensation of murder, no real cortical stacks are destroyed.
But the black market, of course, exploits this cap with something called mind bites.
Which is what exactly?
It's the concept of sampling the signal of digitally freighted rich people, so these skeins of memory and feeling, and then selling it as a black market commodity. It's like stealing momentary glimpses into the elite life, a kind of unauthorized, raw intellectual tourism.
Which contrasts sharply with the authorized, sanitized skull walks that you see published in society magazines.
Those are strictly edited for public consumption. The desire for mind bites proves that the vast wealth gap creates this corresponding appetite for the raw, unvarnished experience of the elite.
And the sources expose the brutal economics of this. The line is, real human flesh is cheaper than a machine.
It's a chilling line. It costs less to use a real person in a snuff operation than it does to develop and maintain the highly complex virtual equivalent.
This systemic inequality and this devaluation of organic life, it forms the backdrop for the most massive legal battle of their time, Resolution 653.
This is a pivotal test case. It's going through the UN court, and the Bay City Public Prosecutor's Office wants to subpoena a Catholic woman who is currently held in storage.
In this case, is an existential threat to the meth way of life. This is where we need to connect the dots, right?
Deeply. The Vatican argues that since the woman is digitized and in storage, her consciousness is no longer within a viable body, which means she is technically dead and in the hands of God. They call the idea of forcing her back into a sleeve to testify blasphemy.
So if the court sides with the Vatican, it provides a legal framework that could undermine the entire concept of re-sleeving stored consciousness. It essentially classifies stored stacks as the dead.
Exactly. And if the meth's backups are legally deemed the dead, then their guaranteed immortality is suddenly precarious. It becomes subject to religious and legal objections every single time they want to re-sleeve.
Which is why Bancroft has an undeclared influence in the UN court regarding this resolution. It's not about religion for him.
Not at all. It's about validating the economic and legal status quo that allows him to live forever. The outcome of Resolution 653 determines whether the meths are merely the extremely long-lived or whether they are actively defying the natural and spiritual order.
And there's a really dark twist related to this religious fervor. The sources explicitly note that Catholic individuals are specifically recruited by illicit operations.
Like the snuff houses.
Precisely because their deeply held religious conscience prevents them from telling any tales after the event.
It's a terrifying form of digital security for criminals. If a Catholic victim is re-sleeved later, their faith dictates they have to view their time in storage as time spent in the afterlife. They can't speak about what happened to them while their stack was stored or what they saw before their body died.
Which provides this unique legal and spiritual loophole that criminals exploit to guarantee silence.
The very moral compass of the poor is literally weaponized against them.
Okay, with that knowledge of the social and mechanical structure, let's turn back to Kovacs' mission, which begins immediately with conflict. He is leased to Bancroft, discharged by Warden Sullivan, who calls Kovacs a recidivist with this overt hostility.
And then Officer Kristin Ortega transports him to Bancroft's residence, but her involvement is immediately suspect.
Right. Ortega's position is a major contradiction that needs a closer look. She's the head of the police's organic damage division, and while she arranges his transport, she insists that the case is officially closed.
Ruled an open and shut suicide. Yet she facilitates Kovacs' meeting with the very man who's challenging that ruling.
It sounds like deliberate internal sabotage, doesn't it? She and her team, who we saw flanking Kovacs at the storage facility, they clearly reflect the general police hostility towards meths.
So it's a calculated political move. Officially, you satisfy procedure by closing the suicide case. But privately, you ensure that Bancroft, who you dislike, has the means and Envoy to challenge the verdict and stir up trouble for the meth elite.
And that tension is immediately visible to Kovacs. Outside the terminal, a woman shoves a leaflet at him.
Yeah, and it asks rhetorically, can a machine save your soul?
And the answer printed underneath is a definitive no.
That's fascinating. The political and theological war over Resolution 653 is literally being waged on streets right outside the prison facility where Kovacs is re-sleeved.
It instantly grounds his personal return to life in this massive social context we've just been talking about. Okay, so Bancroft's rationale for why his death had to be murder is simple. It's arrogant, and it's based entirely on his technological advantage.
He dismisses suicide because both he and his wife knew that killing the sleeve wouldn't work, thanks to that mandatory 48-hour remote stack update at Psychosec.
So therefore, he concludes, the killer had to be a stranger, someone who didn't know about the remote.
And this assumption dictates the whole investigation. But the police, they just utterly failed to investigate several key pieces of suspicious evidence that suggested an outside intrusion. Well, first, a cruiser landed 2 kilometers from the Suntouch house perimeter, precisely outside the security surveillance pickup range.
Convenient.
Very. And to facilitate this landing, there was conveniently no satellite cover overhead at that precise time. This requires coordination, timing, and knowledge of Bancroft's security blind spots.
Wait, the police ignored a cruiser landing 2 kilometers away, and the condition of the tracks leading from the landing site was consistent with a 2-kilometer track.
They ignored it all.
That isn't just a bungled investigation. That sounds like deliberate regulatory indifference toward a meth's life. Why rule it a suicide if the physical evidence points directly to intrusion?
Because politically, it was easier and more expedient to just dismiss it as suicide. Furthermore, the final clue was this cryptic call placed from Bancroft's room shortly after 3 a.m. the night he was killed.
What was on the call?
It wasn't a distress call. It was just a time check and the sound of someone breathing, which the police inexplicably chose to ignore. This suggests Bancroft was either expecting someone or was making a final communication before he died.
And Kovacs immediately encounters friction from the Bancroft family itself. Miriam Bancroft, Lauren's wife of nearly 250 years, is overtly hostile to the police and, it seems, to the investigation.
She confirms that Bancroft was delayed returning from Osaka, where he had a routine meeting with a marine development company, Pacificon. He was using a transit clone. That minor deviation from his rigid routine is the only variable in an otherwise clockwork existence.
And before Kovacs can even establish the baseline facts, interference begins. It proves someone desperately wants this case to stay closed.
He's ambushed at the Hendricks Hotel by a hitman, Dmitry Kadmin.
Kadmin is described as a Vladivostok hitman with a spare sleeve. So a serious professional operative.
He's paid by someone who wanted the Bancroft case to remain closed permanently. Kovacs, of course, using his Envoy conditioning, defeats him, which leads to Kadmin's arrest and storage. This is a crucial early discovery. It confirms that powerful, organized forces are actively working to stop Kovacs.
And this is where we see the chaotic loyalty of automated intelligence. We get an unexpected ally.
The Hendricks Hotel AI.
Right. The AI achieved artificial intelligence status during the corporate wars crash, and it actually bought itself out. It remains hardwired to desperately want customers, so sometimes it speaks with this annoying antique service industry idiolect.
But despite its odd quirks, the AI proves to be invaluable. It later helps Kovacs by letting him know when visitors arrive and locking down his floor during the ambush.
It's a fantastic image, isn't it? A millennia-old AI, fundamentally driven by these antiquated customer service protocols, proving more loyal than the human police force assigned to protect the wealthy.
The society Kovacs navigates is just saturated with these sophisticated chemical and psychological tools designed to enhance combat, pleasure, emotional manipulation.
These drugs effectively turn the organic body into an instrument of performance.
They really do.
Let's start with the emotional manipulation used by the meths. Merge 9 or empathin. That's a good example.
Used by Miriam Bancroft during her encounter with Kovacs. It's a chemical trigger that causes sensations to blur until I could find no distinction, and it leads to mutual sensory overload and concurrent climaxes.
So it's synthetic, perfect intimacy. It's a way for the wealthy, who have grown emotionally detached over centuries, to force an authentic connection and bypass the exhaustion of genuine emotion.
It just reduces complex relationship dynamics down to a chemical spike.
We also see aggression enhancers. Stallion Toro, it's a male response enhancer, boosts aggression, sexual prowess, confidence.
And Kovacs observes its effects on Bancroft's chauffeur, Curtis, who is chemically wound up in the illusion that he was dangerous. This points to the democratization of aggression through chemistry.
And that enhancement, it trickles down to the desperate. Kids on the street use a cheaper version called Stiff for near-death experiences. They see it as cheaper than suicide.
So this chemical boost, which was originally military or elite, is now used by the poor to briefly escape the banality and pain of their single lifespan existence.
Kovacs, though, he relies on his own military-grade enhancement, beta-phenetine.
Right. This high-end drug creates a cold detachment, and it slows his heartbeat and breathing to extremely low levels, allowing him to operate as the Reaper.
And that drug is about precision and survival.
Absolutely. It not only optimizes combat performance, but it protects him from proximity sense detection. When you can suppress biological signs of life to that extent, you become invisible to the highly advanced sensory systems used in surveillance and tracking.
It turns him into the ultimate ghost operative.
And his foundation for all these skills is the Envoy conditioning, which, as we know, is banned on Earth unless it's UN mandated. This rigorous training provides not just physical skills, but deeply ingrained psychological counter-interrogation routines.
And His history includes intense virtual torture training, which is why he knows exactly how to identify it in others.
Which brings us to the brutal use of virtual reality as a tool of the state. Dmitry Kadmin, the hitman, is subjected to virtual questioning in a bubble fab cabin
Yeah.
with electrodes and hypnophones.
The interrogation by Ortega is terrifying because it's so controlled. She uses system magic to manipulate the virtual environment. She makes a table disappear. She produces a blackjack awl to inflict pain that can be digitally monitored and adjusted.
It completely skirts the lines of physical abuse laws by making the pain digital yet totally real to the consciousness inside.
And Kovacs himself went through this on an exponentially greater scale at a place called the Way Clinic.
His virtual interrogation routine was modeled on the Sharian religious police, who were known for horrific physical torture, like cutting skin slits and tearing them open. This is not just discipline, this is psychological obliteration on a loop.
That's terrifying. So the Envoy training isn't just about physical conditioning, it's about weaponizing infinite digital trauma.
The training goal, as stated in the sources, was explicit. The mind does interesting things under extreme stress: hallucination, displacement, retreat. Here in the core, you'll learn to use them all, not as blind reactions to adversity, but as moves in a game.
So they're teaching them how to survive psychological obliteration and then use that survival mechanism to fight.
Precisely. They turn survival mechanisms into combat advantages. And we see the psychological scars of this training reflected in Kovacs' own mind through the patchwork man metaphor.
He experiences these vivid, violent dreams and hallucinations featuring his old comrade, Jimmy DeSoto.
And Jimmy DeSoto tells him, "You got to get right down in those cracks to access me." It's a perfect image for Kovacs' fragmented psyche.
So his mind is literally cracked from the trauma of the Envoy conditioning, and the truth is very deep within those fissures.
And the patchwork man is this terrifying childhood story his father used to tell. Mad Ludmila stitching her children's mangled parts into a carcass, animated by a tengu. It's deeply symbolic.
How so?
Kovacs and his former copy connected this fragmented, violent imagery to authority figures, which led them to believe they spent years killing users or pimps who looked like their father.
So the ultimate connection is that the patchwork man is presented as a metaphor for the father figure because they couldn't bear to look too closely at the truth.
Exactly. Kovacs' current self is a patchwork of the current sleeve's memories, Riker's memories, the Envoy conditioning, and his own childhood trauma. He's forced to acknowledge that his relentless pursuit of violence was partially driven by this repressed, filial need to destroy the figure of his abusive father.
The psychological architecture of Kovacs' current body, it leads us directly to the core of the mystery, the identity of his sleeve and why someone wanted him dead.
And Kovacs learns he's wearing the body of Elias Riker, a cop formerly in sleeve theft who was disgraced and stacked after a botched raid on a black clinic in Seattle.
Yeah, leaving 124 holes shot into a cruiser.
Riker was clearly framed. He was accused of murdering 4 people and a dipper, someone who wipes stack records, polygraph tested that Riker hired him. But the sheer depth of Ortega's loyalty suggests this was all a lie.
She took on the sleeve mortgage.
She did.
That's not just loyalty. That is a life-altering debt, likely spanning centuries, just to keep Riker's body out of the city auction room. If she's willing to sacrifice that much, there is a profound personal cost or hidden agenda behind keeping that specific body alive.
It's a body she knows is politically compromised,
Yep.
but which she clearly values.
And Kovacs quickly deduces the setup. Someone used Riker's disgraced name and record to spring Kadmin from storage, hired Kadmin to kill the Envoy, and then allowed Kadmin to be rearrested.
The conspiracy required a clean frame and an expendable asset to make the Bancroft case look cleanly closed.
And the ultimate manipulator behind this tangled, multi-layered web is Raylene Kawahara.
Another powerful myth, the owner of the high-end, airborne whorehouse head in the clouds.
And Kovacs describes her not as a simple brawler, but as a chess player.
Her background demonstrates her ruthlessness. She grew up in Fission City and was known for using contaminated water siphoned from reactor cooling systems as a form of protection enforcement.
So she has always understood how to use environmental decay and chemical threats as tools of intimidation and control.
Kawahara's motive is tied to what she views as intolerable risk, the risk of legal exposure. Her high-end facility was involved in illegal activities, specifically snuff.
The process of killing a client or whore and keeping the digital stack of the victim to sell as a virtual experience.
And the critical mistake Kawahara made was killing a Catholic snuff whore named Mary Lou Hinchley, who died when she fell from head in the clouds trying to escape.
And because of her Catholicism, Hinchley's stack represented a massive active threat, directly relevant to the legal challenge in Resolution 653.
If Hinchley's stack was exposed, it would not only prove Kawahara ran a snuff operation, but it would inject a critical, explosive religious element into the heart of the legal battle.
That gave Kawahara the perfect leverage over Bancroft. She was blackmailing him. Vote down Resolution 653 to protect the meth's way of life and the legality of resleeving. Or face exposure as a murderer linked to the Rentang case and her illegal activities on Head in the Clouds.
She leveraged a single, poor, dead Catholic woman against the entire legal future of digital immortality.
Okay, so now we arrive at the final, complex, and cynical truth of the Bancroft case. Bancroft ultimately chose suicide. He shot his sleeve's head off, but not because he wanted to die.
No, he did it to avoid viral contamination of his remote stack.
Let's break down the layers of betrayal here. The virus, called Rawling 4851, was designed to eat out every scrap of coherent intellect in a machine's core.
And it was administered to one of Bancroft's clones by Cheryl Bostock, a psychosec attendant who was paid by Bancroft's own wife, Miriam.
Miriam engineered the viral injection as a cruel, slow-burn act of revenge for his centuries of infidelity.
So Bancroft was caught between a rock and a hard place. Exposure by Kawahara, or viral extinction engineered by his wife. The choice he made, shooting his own sleeve, was a means to control the narrative.
He chose the immediate violent death of his body over the slow, agonizing, permanent death of his digitized consciousness.
But the contamination threat was ultimately a lie engineered by Kovacs himself to protect Kawahara and secure the outcome.
Right. Kovacs used a data broker, Irene Elliott, to deploy that virus Rawling 4851 against a criminal AI known as Jack It Up in a remote surveillance-free location.
This created a false precedent. Kovacs deployed the virus so Kawahara could spin the narrative that Bancroft died to avoid that exact type of contamination. A story that was expedient for her because it prevented any public scrutiny of the Rentang and Hinchley blackmail plot.
It allowed Kawahara to claim the victory of having influenced Bancroft without exposing her own crimes.
And the sources confirmed Bancroft was lying to Kovacs the whole time. He had earlier insisted he would never have bungled his suicide if he truly intended to die.
But Kawahara confirmed she told Bancroft the truth about Hinchley, and he ultimately chose not to side with the meth faith, disappointing her.
And the physical evidence was right under the police's noses, proving Bancroft lied. Kovacs finds forensic evidence disturbed dust and finger marks on Bancroft's antique telescope.
The one he claimed he hadn't used in 2 centuries.
Exactly. And the telescope was pointed at a specific spot of empty air 2 kilometers up the location of the suspected cruiser landing site.
So Bancroft saw the killer arrive. He lied about the telescope's use, which means he saw his blackmailer, or proxy, land and approach the house. He chose to confront them, and when he realized the depth of the trap exposure of murder versus viral erasure, he chose the quick, violent suicide of his sleeve.
All to preserve the integrity of his backed-up stack, ensuring his ego lived on, untainted by the virus. Hashtag tag outro.
Okay, let's unpack this dizzying, century-spanning mess one last time. Laurens Bancroft, the patriarch of immortality, he committed suicide not to die, but to preserve his remote stack from Kawahara's lethal blackmail.
His own wife, Miriam, engineered the viral injection as a calculated, cruel act of revenge for his 250 years of infidelity.
And Raylene Kawahara used the entire situation, the murder, the religious court case, dead Catholic prostitute, to frame a cop and leverage an envoy into closing the case in her favor.
All to ensure her illegal enterprise remained secure.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what stands out is that Bancroft's extreme longevity didn't eliminate his human flaws, it simply magnified them. After 300 years, his petty infidelities still led to an act of betrayal that almost caused his permanent extinction.
And the meths are powerful enough to manipulate the foundational laws of life and death, religion and justice to secure their status. Their entire society is built on that cynical, quantifiable truth we uncovered. Real human flesh is cheaper than a machine.
The cost of a human life, even one backed by religious consequence like Mary Lou Hinchley's, was less than running a virtual crime simulation.
Just brutal.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Despite digital immortality, world-spanning technology, and consciousness storage, this reality is still fundamentally defined by the same old power struggles.
Class warfare, profound resentment, and intimate betrayal.
When you can live forever and cheat death by ensuring layers upon layers of digital and physical redundancy, what becomes the real value of a single temporary human life, organic or digital?
The irony is that the Meths bought immortality, but they still couldn't escape the mundane human drama of jealousy, infidelity, and spite. They achieved eternal life, only to prove that eternal life is just as messy as the temporary version.
And that's the provocative thought to mull over. If the most powerful people in the galaxy spend centuries protecting their digital ego from extinction, only to be undone by a petty domestic spat and a piece of forensic dust on an antique telescope, does immortality truly elevate humanity, or does it just guarantee that our flaws are preserved forever?